Twilight of an Empire. By Zhongwen and Boya. Chapter 10, Religion, Cultural Pluralism, and the Decline of Christianity. Opening. Dear listeners, for the final installment of our series, we're going to talk about a question deeper than politics, the spiritual foundation of a society. When we discuss the rise and fall of America, the crisis of democracy, and the fracturing of society, we tend to focus on visible structures, economics, politics, media. But there is another, deeper, more subtle change quietly taking place beneath the surface of American society, the decline of Christianity, and with it, the tension between spiritual vacuum and cultural pluralism. 1. America, a nation founded on Christianity? America's founding is inseparable from Christianity. In 1620, the Pilgrims aboard the Mayflower came to North America to escape religious persecution and seek religious freedom. They believed that this new continent was the promised land God had prepared for them, where they would build a covenantal community in accordance with God's will. This religious conviction of manifest destiny became deeply embedded in American national identity. In its text, the U.S. Constitution establishes the separation of church and state as a fundamental principle, prohibiting Congress from making any law respecting an establishment of religion or restricting its free exercise. This ensures that America is legally a secular state, not a theocracy. Yet culturally and socially, Christianity has long been the core source of America's moral order, community cohesion, and public values. From Tocqueville's observations of America in the 19th century, to the Eisenhower era's formal addition of Under God to the Pledge of Allegiance, Christianity's central place in American public life was almost never seriously challenged. Until recent decades. 2. The numbers on Christianity, a quiet earthquake. The data are stark. In the 1970s, over 90% of Americans self-identified as Christians. By the 2020s, that figure had fallen to roughly 65%, and it continues to decline. The drop was about 1 percentage point per decade for a time, but has accelerated in recent years. Some studies show a decline of more than 1 percentage point per year. At the same time, the proportion of knowns, those who check none for religious affiliation, has skyrocketed from roughly 5% in the 1990s to about 30% today. This is one of the fastest religious shifts in American social structure. The age breakdown is particularly telling. Among Americans over 65, Christians still make up roughly 80%. But among those under 30, the Christian share has already fallen below 50%, while the knowns account for close to or over 40%. This means that as the older generation passes away, Christianity's share in American society will continue to shrink. 3. Why is Christianity declining? The decline of Christianity in America is the result of multiple converging factors. First, the spread of higher education. Studies consistently show that higher levels of education correlate with weaker religious adherence, especially in areas where scientific education creates tension with religious doctrine. Developments in evolutionary biology, cosmology, and neuroscience have exerted sustained intellectual pressure on traditional religious narratives of creation and the soul. Second, a crisis of trust within the churches themselves. The continued exposure of sexual abuse scandals in the Catholic Church, and moral failures among leaders of large evangelical megachurches, have led many Americans, especially the younger generation, to lose trust in organized religious institutions. "I believe in God, but I don't trust the church" has become an increasingly common spiritual profile. Third, the deepening of individualistic culture. Contemporary culture places a high premium on personal autonomy and emotional authenticity. The cultural ethic of be yourself stands in fundamental tension with organized religion's demands for doctrinal obedience and adherence to precepts. For many young people, religion's sense of constraint outweighs the sense of belonging and meaning it provides. Fourth, political backlash. Since the rise of the moral majority in the 1980s, evangelical Christianity has formed an increasingly close political alliance with the Republican Party. This has led many to perceive Christianity less as a universal spiritual faith and more as a cultural label for conservative politics. Many moderates who might otherwise have maintained their faith have chosen to distance themselves from the Christian label altogether because they disagree with Republican politics. 4. Spiritual vacuum and substitute beliefs. Religion does not disappear without reason. The needs it fulfills, meaning, belonging, moral order, transcendent experience, remain fundamental human longings. When Christianity declines, these needs do not vanish, they flow into alternative belief systems. Wokeness, as we discussed in an earlier episode, is structurally highly religious in character: original sin, historical oppression, salvation, social justice, sacred texts, theoretical writings, heretics, the unwoke, holy war, culture wars. Many observers have noted that for younger generations who have lost traditional religious faith, wokeness fills a similar emotional and psychological void. Nationalism and political tribalism also function as quasi-religions: flags, rituals, rallies, the cult of leadership, and the explicit rejection of the other. MAGA rallies, in form, bear a striking resemblance to revival meetings. Techno-utopianism and consumerism offer other alternative meaning frameworks. Silicon Valley's technological utopianism believes that technology can solve all human problems. Consumerism believes that purchasing brings happiness. Social media's like mechanism satisfies the human craving for recognition and belonging. Yet none of these substitutes, at present, can fully replace the deep sense of meaning and moral community that religion once provided. 5. Pluralism, opportunities and challenges in tension. Alongside the decline of Christianity, America's religious landscape has become increasingly pluralistic. Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, and various new spiritual movements all occupy growing roles in America's religious ecology. Immigration has brought new religious traditions. Immigrants from Latin America have brought vibrant Catholic and Pentecostal traditions. Immigrants from Asia have brought Buddhism, Hinduism, and Confucian ethics. Immigrants from the Middle East and Africa have brought diverse forms of Islamic practice. In an ideal state, this pluralism is a source of enrichment, different spiritual traditions coexisting in mutual respect, learning from one another, and collectively providing moral resources for a pluralistic society. But in reality, pluralism also brings profound tensions. When a society loses a common value foundation, how can it build enough moral consensus to sustain social cohesion? When different religious traditions hold fundamentally different understandings of family, gender, and the sanctity of human life, how can common ground be found at the policy level? These questions have no easy answers. Conclusion: the spiritual reconstruction of a civilization. The historian Arnold Toynbee once said that the rise and fall of civilizations is, at root, a spiritual matter. When a civilization's spiritual core begins to hollow out, when it can no longer provide a convincing framework of meaning for its members, decline has already begun from within. The spiritual challenge America faces today is real. The decline of Christianity is not necessarily a bad thing in itself. Religious faith is a matter of personal freedom, and forcing or maintaining nominal belief has never been America's founding spirit. But when the old spiritual foundation has eroded and a new moral community has not yet taken shape, this transitional period marks a society's most vulnerable moment. In the final analysis, the 300-year cycle of rise and fall is not about economic data or military power. It is about one question: do the people of this society still believe in something worth sacrificing for in common? When that answer begins to blur, the pendulum of history has already begun to move. Thank you for listening.